I've got several of these Reelcraft air hose reels. Both of them are leaking at the rotary union, so I assume that the O-ring was bad on these, so I disassembled with the intent to replace the O-ring. I did find after I disassembled it that the O-ring is not removable on this design of the Reelcraft. So the option was to machine a new part for it. So I disassembled it. This is the main hub, and there's a slot on the side of it. You're able to, I put a steel block in there to hold it in a vise to unscrew the end of it. This is the rotary union. It's replaceable. You could purchase these for about $50, $60 online. The problem is there's a O-ring inside here, but you cannot get this apart. There's a ferrule that is crimped on as you tighten the nut that holds the whole shaft assembly in there. So the only way to salvage this is to we'll cut this inner shaft and we'll separate it and we'll machine up a new part, put a new O-ring on, new ferrule, and reattach it. This is the O-ring, the original O-ring. This one actually has a split in it. It's just been so dried out from age and use. So that we'll machine up a new brass insert. See, it's very brittle O-ring in here. The shaft can be machined out of any just free machining brass. It really doesn't matter that much. There's not that much load on this, and even with a lot of usage, it's low RPMs. With a little grease lubrication, it's not going to have any issue with wear. So I was able to machine this up pretty quickly. I've got a drawing that I will attach to the YouTube video and the information below, so you can use that as a reference if you're replacing these. Otherwise, what I did, I just reverse engineered it, measured it up, and machined it to match the original. This is just a quick comparison of the original shaft that had to be cut and then the new shaft that's been newly machined. I just want to do a dry fit here with the ferrule and a nut just to make sure they fit. The shaft will be inserted from the back end of the housing assembly. For the housing assembly, there's an O-ring that goes between that and the main hub. That O-ring is a 2-016 O-ring. I did add some lubrication to that. It's a static seal, so as it's tightened up, just to make sure it doesn't have any binding, I just added a little white lithium grease to it. Prior to inserting the shaft assembly into the housing, installed the O-ring, put some lithium grease on the O-ring area as well as the shaft area. That O-ring, it's a 2-013 O-ring, and just lubricated that up. That will rotate in the housing, and snap it into housing. Make sure the O-ring is going into the housing without pinching. So you may have to just push it in, work its way around to avoid any pinching as it's being inserted. With the shaft assembled into the housing, slide the nut over the shaft and then the ferrule over the shaft. And using the tubing assembly from the center hub, attaching it to the 90-degree fitting, making sure that the shaft stays fully embedded into the housing assembly as you're tightening the nut. You want to be able to crimp that sleeve in place with the tube in the correct, or the shaft in the correct position. So once that is assembled, then you'll tighten that up and make sure that the crimp is sufficient to make the seal. Place the center hub in a vise, again using the square piece of tool steel against that slot, tightening up the rotary union assembly, making sure that O-ring stays in position and doesn't get pinched. And from that completes the center hub assembly with the rotary union. You should have good free motion if everything's been done correctly. For the hub assembly, added some lithium grease in there. One is rust control, make sure that doesn't rust, but also provide a good swivel. And added the retaining rings that were removed. Those rings didn't have to be removed, but I removed them just to give me better access to everything as I was working with it. Slid the hub assembly into the spool, put the back retaining clip in place. I found on Reassembly I had to take apart the spring housing assembly. I could not get the unit back together. The spring was a little deformed from extended use, and I couldn't slide that housing over the end of it. I think by design you're supposed to be able to do that. But I disassembled everything and then put everything back together piece by piece to make sure I was able to get everything aligned. It was a little tricky trying to reach the back of those screws, but I was able to wedge a screwdriver in there to hold it as I tighten the nuts up. Do make sure that you get the spring assembly back in the right orientation so that it engages the purl correctly. After final assembly, you just went around and make sure everything was tightened up. And then the last step is to make sure that the hub assembly, as it goes through the spring housing assembly, there's a set screw on the back side. You got to rotate that hub assembly to make sure that the flat is visible through that set screw hole. And just go ahead and tighten that down using a little bit of Teflon tape, putting on the final air fitting to the end of the housing there. And from that point, it's just a matter of reassembling the hose, reattaching the hose and winding it. I'm not going to go into the details, but you can look at other videos on how to properly preset that as far as the spring tension as you wind the hose. It's fairly straightforward. But once I was able to get it all back together, the thing works just like brand new. Thanks for watching.